The car window vibrated softly under the South Florida heat. I sat in the rented vehicle peering through a torn sun visor, watching the shadow of an old magnolia tree obscure part of the porch of the house I once called home. Sweat soaked my back, not just from the heat. It was that peculiar unease, the kind that only surfaces when you stand before a door where no one waits for you to walk through. No welcome sign. No one rushing out to hug me. No embrace or surprised glance. Just an old wooden gate creaking with each gust of wind, and a faded American flag fluttering on the porch, as if nothing from the past had ever changed. I stepped out of the car, my heels lightly crunching the gravel. My hand gripped the handle of my suitcase, the only one I brought after 15 years. The house loomed before me, white picket fence, bougainvillea vines, and something inside me tightened. I had once dreamed of this return. In my dreams, my mother hugged me, my father's eyes welled with tears. Natalie ran out, embracing me like the 8-year-old sister who used to cling to me. But dreams are dreams. This was reality. I knocked on the door. After a long pause, footsteps approached. The door swung open. My mother. Her gaze brushed past me like a breeze over water, leaving no ripples. "You're here," she said, then turned and walked inside. No hug. No joy. In her hands was a tray of heart-shaped cookies, clearly for an engagement party. Natalie was getting married. I knew from an invitation sent to my base, no personal note included. My father sat at the dining table. Still the tall, broad figure, but his hair had grayed significantly. He looked up, eyeing me like an old newspaper found on the porch. "Oh, still alive." His voice was flat, like a weather report. Not scornful, not friendly. Just indifferent. I forced a smile, my lips curling into a dry grin. Still alive. Doing pretty well, actually. No one asked where I'd been all those years. No one asked what I'd done. Dinner was cold bread and leftover barbecue. I sat at the edge of the table on a folding chair. Natalie wasn't there. I heard her laughter echo from upstairs, mixed with the sound of a video call, probably showing off wedding invitations. That evening, my mother led me to the back of the house. She opened the garage door. "Your room's full of Natalie's stuff now. Make do okay. The garage is clean. There's a fan." I nodded. No questions, no complaints. I'd slept under trucks on the Syrian border. A garage in America was a luxury, but somehow I still felt cold. Not from the industrial fan whirring overhead, but from the way I'd been arranged out of the family picture. I lay on an air mattress. The ceiling was stained with paint streaks. The smell of rubber and motor oil was oddly familiar. Next to me was a box holding a white wedding dress labeled Natalie Wedding, July 22nd. Natalie, my sister, 3 years younger. The perfect child. Intelligence officer. Her face in military magazines photographed with her fiancé, the son of a 4-star general. And me. A name erased from the system, a ghost operating in places that didn't exist on maps. No title. No medals. No proof. I once thought I didn't need recognition, but looking at the family photo in the living room where I wasn't present, I realized I hadn't just been forgotten. I'd been erased. I know this isn't just my story. How many others have sacrificed in silence only to be pushed to the margins because their story didn't fit? If you've ever felt erased from your own family, I want to hear from you. Comment, "I'm still here." I'll read every word. My name is Emily Carter. I was once the commander of a SEAL unit no one knew existed. My code name was erased. Orders came through encrypted channels. The places I fought aren't on any map. My teammates no public records. We were shadows, and I survived. Now I'm back, not for applause, but to face it all. What I didn't know was that the past I thought I'd buried was about to resurface. Not in the way I wanted, but in a way that could swallow me and those I swore to protect. The first night in the garage, I couldn't sleep. Crickets chirped outside the window. The smell of damp grass lingered. Natalie's laughter echoed somewhere in the house. I rolled over my hand, instinctively reaching for my old military watch. My phone screen lit up urgent notification. I opened it. A code flashed, "Unauthorized access archive Thunderwing." I froze. Someone had accessed the most classified operation of my career. I tapped further. The trace log appeared, internal IP, Jacksonville. The accessor, Natalie Carter. I couldn't breathe. I always thought the worst pain was the whistle of bullets, or the moment a teammate lay motionless on red dirt. I was wrong. The real pain was standing before your family's wall of memories and realizing you were never there. The next morning, I walked into the living room. The Carter house was arranged as it always had been, as if time had merely brushed by. On the dark wood-paneled wall hung carefully framed photos, my father in his Navy uniform from his submarine command days, Natalie in her crisp white intelligence officer dress, smiling beside her dashing fiancé. Blake, our youngest brother, in his reserve officer graduation photo. Know me, I hadn't expected much. But seeing myself absent even from a family photo taken in the backyard nearly 20 years ago carved a hollow in my chest. EAD. I was there. I remember wearing a red plaid shirt, hair cropped short, hands scratched from training camp shooting. But the framed photo was cropped. I'd been removed. "Morning," my mother said, walking in with a coffee mug. "There's some bread left in the kitchen. Natalie's up early meeting with the wedding florist. Busy day." I didn't ask. I just nodded. Breakfast wasn't a family reunion for a daughter gone 15 years. No questions, no curiosity, no care. My father read the paper, sipping coffee. Blake was on a video call with his girlfriend. My mother checked the guest list. I was just a silent shadow. That evening, the family hosted a small dinner to meet friends and relatives before the engagement party. I was placed at a folding chair on the edge of the table. Not for lack of space. It was just less inconvenient. No one had to make room. Natalie appeared in a pastel blue dress, hair neatly pinned, smile perfect. Friends swarmed her like bees to honey, eager to hear about her military work and her Charleston wedding plans. I was a faint detail in the background. Oh, my sister Natalie laughed when someone asked about me. She was in the service somewhere. Now she teaches yoga, overseas, like a Zen lifestyle. Yoga. I didn't react. I didn't slam the table. I didn't shout that I'd defused a phone-triggered bomb in a Syrian school under gunfire, carried an unconscious teammate through a firefight, or crawled through sewers to disarm explosives. I just sipped water, gave a faint smile. Because I knew you can't name what they've never seen. I wasn't in Natalie's story. She was just repeating what the family had told her, a story I was never allowed to write. If you've ever been replaced by silence turned into an excuse for inconvenience, leave a comment. I'm still here. Let me know I'm not the only one living in those gaps. That night I sat alone on the back porch. A breeze stirred the old oak trees. I heard my mother's laughter on the phone, Natalie talking about her honeymoon, plans my father shutting the fridge. I heard it all, but I wasn't in any of it. I remembered a Kandahar afternoon asking a teammate, "If I don't make it, what will you tell my family?" He laughed. I'd say you died a warrior. But they probably don't want to hear that. I didn't understand then. Now I do. I went to bed but couldn't sleep. Natalie's words echoed. My sister teaches yoga. I checked my phone. Another message. Update Thunderwing accessor, Natalie Carter, Reserve Lieutenant authentication code. I gripped the phone. My perfect little sister had opened a door that should never have been opened, and I wasn't sure if that door led to light or an abyss. Not all explosions come with fire and sound. Some come from short, simple words that can bury a past or blow it open in front of everyone. I was used to literal explosions, but none left me frozen like this one. Ma'am SEAL Commander, I'll tell you every detail so you understand what happened, and why one sentence changed everything. Natalie's engagement party was at our mother's friend Linda's house, a pristine home in a manicured Jacksonville neighborhood. Polished wood floors, walls adorned with medals and certificates. The crowd was dressed formally, dress uniforms, party gowns, bow ties. I wore a gray shirt, khakis, and unpolished leather shoes. Everyone knew who I was or thought they did. Natalie's sister lives somewhere, does something like yoga. I stood quietly by the buffet near the emergency exit and garden path, an old professional habit: never turn your back to a wall, never stand under a ceiling light. Natalie shone. Her smile was perfect. Her eyes measured, her walk poised, just as military magazines described. She was arm in arm with her fiancé, Lieutenant Evan Sharp, young, smart, safe. People loved men like Evan, predictable, promising, with stories easy to tell at dinner. I, of course, wasn't part of the performance. My mother passed by, giving me a look as if I'd ruined the tablecloth. You're standing too close to the wedding flowers, Emily. Don't mess up the photo backdrop. I stepped back half a foot. Said nothing. Then the front door opened. A hush rippled through the room. A man walked in, tall, steady as a rock. Dress uniform, chest gleaming with medals under the chandelier light. I knew him instantly. Colonel Marcus Delgado, I never thought I'd see him again, especially not in Linda's living room, with pink cupcakes and a Love Always Wins sign. Everyone turned to look. He nodded a general greeting, but when his eyes scanned the crowd and landed on me, time stopped. I wasn't sure if he recognized me by my face or my eyes, but in that moment he froze. Not ordinary surprise, but the kind when you see something you thought was gone forever. Then he did the unthinkable. Delgado raised his hand in a crisp salute. "Ma'am, SEAL Commander." The room went silent. I heard my mother's phone hit the floor. A glass clinked against a plate. Natalie, chatting with friends, whipped her head around, mouth agape, speechless. I didn't move, just nodded small sharp. No confirmation, no denial. No need to say more. Delgado lowered his hand, stepped to the side, and joined a group of officers as if he hadn't just shaken the entire party. But I knew, and they knew, that moment had changed how everyone saw me. A man nearby whispered, "SEAL for real." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Natalie's gaze cut through me like a thin blade, confused, embarrassed, panicked. She feared something she didn't understand had just exploded, threatening her carefully arranged cards. After that, no one approached me. No one chatted. Questions retreated to safety. No more yoga jokes. No more quiet laughs at me standing alone, the bride to be stopped smiling. I lingered by the fruit table, quietly checking my phone. The alert remained, unauthorized access archive Thunderwing. I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. Someone in this house, my own blood, had intentionally or not unearthed what I'd buried for a decade. If you've ever lived a life no one knows or wants to know, you'll understand me. Leave one word real. So I know I'm not the only one existing between two unconnected worlds. That night I left early. No one stopped me. Natalie didn't look at me again. My mother whispered to someone pretending nothing happened. My father skipped the party, citing a headache. I drove alone to the old house. In the rearview mirror, my reflection was blurry, a vague shape under streetlights. I remembered meeting Delgado in Syria. We spoke 3 sentences. He never knew my real name. But today he named my title, one that exists in no public record. That meant Thunderwing was no longer safe. Someone had pulled my name from the shadows, and this time I couldn't turn back. Some doors once opened can't be closed. They make no sound, no creak, no gust of wind, but their weight can shift an entire life. The door Natalie opened was one of those. I returned to the military lodge near midnight, the sodium lights casting a sickly yellow glow in the hallway. My room was small, Spartan, but neat white walls, iron bed, old wooden desk, and a matte black laptop tucked in my suitcase. I opened it, activated the security system. Step-by-step master code verification sequence, biometric scan retinal check via the internal camera. No one knew I still had access. The fewer who knew, the safer. But tonight the system wasn't silent. Warning, unauthorized access to Thunderwing archive. My fingers froze. My breath hitched. I opened the log. Access time 18:07 today. Source internal IP. Reserve Officer Training Division, Jacksonville. Accessor Lieutenant Natalie Carter. I couldn't believe my eyes. Natalie accessing Thunderwing. I ran a secondary trace. The results confirmed my perfect little sister, the Carter family darling, had used her military ID to enter the system, but she didn't access a summary or public file. She triggered the raw data names, locations, comms, unredacted mission logs. The worst part, Thunderwing's files had an emergency trigger. Unauthorized access sent alerts to everyone on the mission list, those still alive and those at risk if exposed. I opened the mission map, one I'd drawn from memory landing points, mine placements, evacuation routes, blood marks, burn scars, and the last place we heard Maritza's voice over the radio. Thunderwing wasn't a pretty story. It was a gray mission, neither fully legal nor illegal. A liminal space between policy and execution. 6 of us ventured into a lawless triangle, disabling a signal station funding 3 terrorist networks. We succeeded, but at a cost. And now, with one careless click, Natalie had reignited that bloodstain on the map. I opened a secondary screen logging into the old encrypted comms channel. The status read 2 alerts triggered, 1 impact point, 1 identity at risk of exposure. I forced steady breaths, but my nerves screamed, danger, danger. I knew Natalie didn't mean it. She couldn't decipher the dense code or foresee the catastrophic consequences. Maybe she was researching an essay, or just curious. But in my world, curiosity wasn't just a metaphor for death. I wondered who gave her access. Who leaked the link to that classified folder in a Pentagon-level security system that doesn't happen by accident? I sat motionless, gripping the mouse eyes glued to the screen. Have you ever been yanked back by the past, not as a memory, but as a raw force tearing your reality apart? If you felt that right, I lived again. I want to know I'm not crazy for trembling at names no one dares say aloud. Finally, I sent a signal to Ellie Tran, the only surviving Thunderwing member still in contact. She was our electronic recon specialist, intercepting encrypted signals. If anyone knew what was happening, it was her. My message was brief. Unauthorized activation. Trace exposed. Meet ASAP. I leaned back. The screen's light reflected in my eyes, tired, vigilant eyes that no longer belonged to a house with a white picket fence and a wedding dress in the living room. I'd lived 15 years as a shadow. Shadows can't be identified. But now, someone had shone a light on me, and the past I swore to bury. I stood, opened a drawer, and pulled out the only printed copy of the Thunderwing map. I folded it carefully into a leather pouch. Even if the world forgot me, I had to remember the way back. This time not to fight, but to stop a new war from erupting. I never thought I'd cry over a piece of paper. I'd seen life and death up close, stood in border rain, not knowing if I'd see morning. But that night, in the old upstairs room, I cried not from pain, but because a silent truth buried for 15 years finally spoke. I'd gone to my old room to find a printed password archive from a past mission. Experience taught me that despite encryption, hard copies were the last resort. My mother said my room was gone. I believed her. But some things leave traces even when buried. The room was filled with Natalie's wedding boxes, invitations, gifts, white silk. I carefully lifted them, checking the old left drawer. My hand brushed a soft leather Bible, the one my mother read every night when I was a child. As I moved it, something slipped from the pages. A folded piece of paper, edges yellowed. No envelope, no title. But the first line stopped me cold. To Emily. I sat on the bed's edge, hands trembling as I opened it. My daughter, if you're reading this, you've come home. And I don't know whether to feel joy or fear. I wrote this in the winter of 2012 after we lost contact for nearly a year. I stood before the 6 o'clock news every night watching images from the Middle East, wondering, are you there? Is that soldier with a backpack in the red dust my girl? Or are you somewhere deeper beyond the camera's reach, where no one remembers? No one knows I wanted to call to ask to scream to hold you. But your father, he wouldn't allow it. He said, don't weaken her. She's on the front lines. She needs resolve, not emotions. I didn't agree, but I didn't dare defy him, because I was scared too. Not that you'd fail, but that you wouldn't come back if I softened you. Do you know, Emily, I still keep your photo in uniform from your first training day. It's hidden behind our wedding picture in the cabinet. When your father's away, I take it out and look. I'm proud, so proud, but I didn't know how to say it without hurting you, so I stayed silent. If you're reading this, please forgive me. I love you, always have. Mom? I don't know how many times I read it, 5, maybe 10, until the words blurred from my tears. I thought she didn't care. I thought I was the spare in this house, but I was loved in a silent, flawed, clumsy way hidden by fear. I'd trained myself not to soften, not to cry, not to be weak. But now, I let the tears fall. No sobbing. No anger, just release. Each tear was an unasked question, an unhugged embrace, an unanswered, are you proud of me? If you've ever held a wound you thought was cold, only to find it waiting to warm at a touch, leave one word. Understood, I think we'll find each other there. I placed the letter back, not to hide it, but because some things don't need to be shouted, just known. I went downstairs for water. My mother was there quietly washing dishes. The yellow light highlighted the wrinkles by her eyes. I looked at her for a long time. I wanted to say something. No words came. She turned, our eyes met. For a brief second, I saw a flicker in her gaze, as if she knew I'd found the letter, as if she'd been waiting for it. I nodded slightly. She said nothing, just placed the glass on the rack. Then she turned away. I stood alone in the kitchen, heart beating slowly. I'd forgiven, not with words or actions, but with a feeling I was no longer angry. For the first time since returning, I didn't feel invisible in this house. Maybe no one looked at me long enough or mentioned me in conversations, but at least behind a wedding photo I'd once existed. I used to think there were 2 kinds of silence, indifference, and helplessness. That night, I learned a third silence born of love, too deep to speak. The crescent moon hung low, its light faint through a thin veil. The Carter backyard was quiet, save for soft cricket chirps. I sat on the wooden porch steps, a cold tea in hand, unable to sleep, not wanting to. The back door opened. I didn't turn, but I knew the heavy, steady footsteps. The precise way he set his glass on the table, like placing binoculars on a submarine deck. My father, Captain Douglas Carter, retired. He sat beside me silent for a long time. We stared at the misty garden where the old swing swayed lightly in the breeze empty. Then he spoke. "Your mother said you found the letter." I nodded, said nothing. "What did you see in it?" he asked. "The truth," I replied. "Something I didn't think I'd find in this house." He exhaled, not weary, not regretful. Just lighter. "Then maybe it's time I tell the rest." I turned to him. Those gray eyes I feared as a child when he was stern now looked tired. Not weak, not broken, but carrying an invisible weight too long. "I knew you joined Special Forces," he said. "Knew from the first month. An old Navy buddy at the Pentagon tipped me off. Your name was pulled from the Naval Academy roster, but didn't show up at any other base." I wasn't surprised, just raised an eyebrow. "So, why didn't you say anything? Never ask, never call." He looked at me unflinching. "Because I was scared." The word stunned me. It had never left his mouth. "I commanded a fleet, lost men, wrote letters to families of those who didn't come back. I knew. Some didn't die from failure, but from carrying too many expectations." I gripped the chair's edge. "I knew if I showed pride, if I praised you, you'd push deeper, prove yourself more, and you wouldn't stop even when you should." He looked away. "I chose the only way I knew to keep you alive. Coldness. No pride, no encouragement, just distance." My throat tightened. "I thought you looked down on me," I whispered. "Thought you only accepted Natalie because she fit the mold." "I didn't choose Natalie over you." He shook his head. "I chose the easier path. You scared me because you dared go where no one else would. Dared to do what I couldn't imagine for my own daughter." I turned away too late to hide the tear rolling down. "I never needed your approval," I said, voice nearly breaking. "Just to know I wasn't forgotten." He placed his hand on my shoulder. The first time in over 15 years. "You were never forgotten, Emily. I remembered every birthday, your old unit number. But I didn't dare dwell too much. I was afraid. If that day came, I'd collapse when the phone rang. I cried truly. Cried. Couldn't stop. And he, the man who hadn't hugged me since I was 12, pulled me close, letting me rest my head on his shoulder like a child. No words, no promises. Just presence, steady, silent, finally there. If you've ever misunderstood someone you love because they didn't know how to love you, write leave one word forgiven. Because sometimes coldness is just a clumsy shield for love too big." We sat there a long time. When I looked up, dawn was breaking. The backyard glistened with dew leaves shimmering silver. I felt lighter, like an invisible armor had been shed. "What's next?" my father asked, his voice low, but not commanding. I clenched my fist. "I have to talk to Natalie." He nodded. "She needs to hear it. And you need to be heard. Some enemies don't hide behind barricades or shoot from rooftops. They don't aim or need a battlefield. They use words. They sign with ink but leave real blood." I found him on a Tuesday afternoon. The military lodge room was silent, only the hum of the fan through the door's crack. I opened my laptop, logging into the encrypted trace system. After my talk with my father, I knew there was no time to hesitate. Natalie opened the door, but someone set the trap long ago. I checked the system report and froze at a new entry data edit transmission. Target Federal Military Oversight Committee. I opened the file. My blood ran cold. It was an official Thunderwing report. But not the truth I lived. The edited report called Thunderwing a tactical and personnel failure. Logs were rearranged, context stripped. A conversation where I halted an airstrike due to civilians was quoted as evidence of hesitation in combat. I scrolled to the bottom. Report proposed by Senator Grant Liddell. My fist clenched. I'd heard of him. A veteran politician loud in Congress about defense policy staunchly against women in special forces claiming biology can't be forced into ideology. I never thought I'd be a pawn in his game. I opened an attached draft bill reassessment of gender roles in special forces. Thunderwing was cited as a prime example of failure. It felt like a punch to the face. We survived. We stopped a signal station funding 3 terrorist networks. We saved 17 civilians, including 5 children. And now it was reduced to one word: failure. I knew why. An unpublicized mission. A team with no records, no names, no titles. No defenders. Perfect to be a sacrificial lamb. If I didn't speak, we'd vanish again, this time deliberately. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. They wouldn't attack me with guns. They'd do worse, rewrite me. Turn me into an example, a mistake to avoid. If you've ever been twisted into a version that isn't you, or seen your name used for something you don't believe, leave one word: truth. Because truth, though distorted, can be reclaimed, if someone dares stand up. I messaged Ellie Tran. They're using Thunderwing. Report manipulated. Lead Liddell. Her reply came in 4 minutes. We need to meet. You have to see this. I arranged to meet at a small Vietnamese cafe 12 miles from the old base. No one knew me there. Or her. Ellie arrived in a long coat, hair tied low, eyes as sharp as ever. She handed me a USB. I found the initial trace. The edit source isn't Congress. It's an internal server using Natalie's authentication code. My throat caught. No way. She doesn't know anything. I believe you, but she's the starting point. Liddell needed a crack to exploit. I held the USB, feeling cold, not from the device, but from the realization. If I didn't fight back, Thunderwing would be rewritten, buried, and worst of all, those who didn't survive would be misremembered. As I left the cafe, a light summer rain fell in Florida, sudden, fierce, then gone. I looked up, letting the drops wake the anger I'd suppressed. I couldn't let Liddell win. Not for me. For Alvarez, Maritza Hayes, those who went to the end of the mission, their names never spoken again. And for Natalie. Whether unwitting or used, she deserved the truth. Not from a senator's mouth, but from mine. Real change doesn't come with a bang. It comes when silence breaks. I never thought I'd see Natalie tremble. She was the type to stand tall, speak just enough smile on cue, and adjust her collar before every parade. She was born to fit every expectation our family had. But when I entered the commander's office at the Jacksonville Reserve Base that afternoon, Natalie sat alone. Her shoulders slumped slightly, her pristine white uniform stained with tea, and her eyes, for the first time since I returned, lacked certainty. You read it, didn't you? She asked, not looking up. No need to explain. I nodded. The altered report. Traced to your ID. But you didn't write it. She exhaled. No, I didn't know what I opened. It was an old folder. The system didn't block me. I thought it was reference material for my essay on gender roles in special forces. She looked up. Her eyes were more like mine than I'd realized. I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't know they'd twist the truth. I was just curious. I was silent for a moment, then said softly, Curiosity's natural, but you don't tear down a house to see how it's built. She bit her lip, hands clenching on her lap. I want to fix it, she said quietly. I sent a request to speak at the hearing. I explained why and asked to face the consequences. I raised an eyebrow. Your superiors ordered silence. You know that. She nodded. I know, but I can't. Not after reading everything. Not after seeing your name, cut into a false footnote. Silence. Then I stepped forward, sat across from her, eyes locked on hers. The first time you didn't choose the easy path, I said, almost whispering. The first time you didn't pick the image, the right words, the safe choice. Natalie's lips tightened. She nodded slightly. Because for the first time I understood, if I stay silent, everything you lived and lost will be blackened by my cowardice. If you've ever stood at the line between right and easy, and chose right despite the cost, leave one word: courage. Because courage isn't fearlessness, it's acting despite fear. I helped Natalie review her statement. Short, powerful, no excuses, no blame. Just acknowledgement and a clear desire to make it right. Not for herself, but for the truth. 3 days later, her request was approved. She'd speak briefly at an internal Defense Department hearing. No press, no media, but senior oversight officers and legislative reps would be there. The night before, Natalie knocked on my lodge room door. She wore civilian clothes, no makeup, no medals. Just Natalie, my sister, without the perfect shell. I never apologized for what I said at the party. The yoga thing, she started. I cut her off. No need to apologize for being foolish. We've all been there. What matters is you didn't keep pretending. She gave a small laugh, lighter, truer. The next morning, the hearing room was silent as a shockwave. Generals, officials, and officers sat in rows. When Natalie stepped up, some shook their heads. A young lieutenant, fresh from training, speaking here, seemed arrogant. But Natalie wasn't arrogant. She stood tall, voice steady. I'm the one who accessed the Thunderwing file without clearance. I didn't understand. But I saw something wrong, and instead of reporting it, I stayed silent. That was my mistake. She paused. But worse than my access was someone using that data to craft a false narrative. As an officer, I can't stand by while the truth is twisted into a political tool. Silence, then murmurs. I saw an old general tilt his head, jotting notes. Natalie looked straight at them. I wasn't there. I didn't serve in Thunderwing. But I know someone who did. And I believe if you let her speak, the truth won't stay blurred. She stepped down. For the first time I stood and clapped. Alone. But soon another clap joined. Then two. Then the whole room. Not loud, but clear. Natalie walked off, eyes wet. I didn't hug her. Just nodded. She nodded back. No words needed. For the first time in years, we weren't on opposite sides of a wall. My hand didn't shake as I opened the file, but my heart did. It beat slowly, heavily, like footsteps across an old battlefield. The Defense Department hearing room was so cold my skin prickled not from the AC, but from the eyes fixed on me. The room was silent enough to hear the paper rustle as I turned the first page. My name is Emily Carter. I began voice neither high nor low, just enough to make them listen. Former commander of a special operations unit in Operation Thunderwing. A ripple of movement spread through the room. A cough, a furrowed brow, but no interruptions. I continued. For 15 years I didn't exist on paper. No photos, no medals, no official commendations. Because my Unit 6 women was trained to work in the dark. I placed an armored hard drive on the table next to a 100-page color printout. No need to emphasize what it was they knew, raw data mission logs, the unfiltered truth. Recently, an altered report was sent to Congress, claiming Thunderwing was a tactical and personnel failure. A negative example of women in special forces. I paused, my gaze sweeping the room. I'm here today to say that's wrong. Not just tactically wrong, a deliberate distortion. Someone flipped a notebook. A young officer leaned in, possibly recording. I projected data mission log excerpts, fragmented audio. My breaths, sirens, my shout to halt an airstrike due to children in the blast radius. I spoke slowly. We didn't fail. We chose humanity over metrics, and for that we were erased from history. The air tightened. Then the back door opened. Natalie walked in. Still in white uniform, but no longer a diligent cadet. An officer and a truth-teller. She strode forward, no permission asked, no hesitation. She handed a small drive to the technician. Seconds later, the screen behind me lit up. I'm the one who accessed the encrypted Thunderwing file, she said, and in doing so, the system logged an anomaly, an edit access from an internal IP at Fort Sentinel. I glanced at the screen. Numbers, codes, a timeline matching the false report. The sender, Colonel Warren Hall. The room froze. A committee member nodded. A female general placed her hand on the file. Ms. Carter, she said, eyes locked on me. You didn't fail. You were never allowed to succeed. My chest tightened. Her words weren't just acknowledgement, they lifted a silent sentence that had lingered for over a decade. We propose the immediate suspension of Colonel Hull pending investigation, another voice said. No fanfare. No vote needed. The order was given. Guards moved. Hull didn't look at me. He bowed his head, shoulders rigid like a man stripped of his last armor. I stood still. Natalie turned to me. No smile. Just a nod. A confirmation we were on the same side for the first time. If you've seen someone stand up for truth when the world wanted silence, leave one word: respect. Because truth doesn't speak itself. It needs someone to open their mouth. The hearing ended without applause. None needed. This silence was agreement. As I left, a young reporter in the cold-lit hallway raised a mic. Commander Carter, how do you feel after the hearing? I paused, thinking. Not a feeling, I said. A duty. When you survive and carry the truth, silence is betrayal. I walked away, the lights no longer harsh. My shadow fell on the floor, not long, not short, not faint. Clear. Some victories don't come with cheers. Just quiet footsteps on marble down a long hallway, bathed in pale yellow light, the kind of glory I never sought, but was now returned. I returned to the Pentagon 4 days later, no longer a witness or a ghost in the files. I came with my real name, real rank, and the only reason I could stand tall, the truth. A young officer led me through security doors. He didn't ask questions, just stole glances as if walking beside a legend he'd heard of, but didn't believe was real. I was used to those looks. They no longer bothered me. Just silence. We stopped at a wooden door engraved with gold Special Honors Room, classified archive. Inside was a small room. Oak walls, moss-green carpet. No one else. No cameras. No reporters. In the center, a black stone wall, smooth, cold, solid. Like memory. On the stone were names. Not many. Each carved deep as if earning their place took immense pain. The officer pointed to the fourth row. Your name will be there. Next to Unit F-23, Thunderwing. I stepped forward. The room was as quiet as a church. I read the names. Maritza, Dana, Lee, Patel, and finally Emily Carter. Just one line, but a line I never thought would exist. I touched the cold stone. Not to wipe tears, but to feel. Real. Finally, I was recognized not out of pity, but because I survived, fought, and didn't fall to lies. If you've ever done right without recognition, leave one word worthy. Not to demand, but to remind that truth always has value, even late. Leaving the room, I was invited to the Defense Secretary's office. He stood as I entered, not out of protocol, but respect. We reviewed all records orders and post-mission reports, he said plainly. You and your team completed a mission no unit man or woman dared take. I didn't reply, just nodded. I wasn't here for praise, but his words mattered not just for me, but for others forgotten. He placed a wooden box on the table. Inside was a Medal of Honor, not for public display. Not for a lack of value, but because its unit was never meant to exist. I can't hold a formal ceremony, he said, eyes direct. But I can do this. He extended his hand. A firm, decisive handshake. On behalf of the government and armed forces we owe you. I shook his hand. No bow, no thanks. Some debts are paid with action, not words. Leaving the Pentagon, I paused at a hallway with a large photo of the first female SEALs. It once had no caption. Now it did. Below the photo, a small line. Thunderwing unit, 6 women, 1 mission unknown. Now known. I stood there a long time. Not for nostalgia. Because soon I'd step into another shadow, and this time I wouldn't go alone. Nothing echoes louder than a silence held too long, except the moment it breaks. The ceremony at my old school took place on a sweltering summer afternoon, magnolia flowers blooming white in the courtyard. I stood backstage in casual clothes, no uniform, no medals, none needed. The small town where I grew up suddenly became the stage for a story buried 15 years rising. Not with medals, but with real people, real scars, real pain, real courage. The poster outside read, "A talk with former SEAL operator Emily Carter. Not every hero stands in the frame." I heard chairs scrape, children giggle, and the slow steps of old leather shoes on wood. A small sound, but enough to slow my heart. I knew those steps. My father. I stepped onto the stage. Under dim yellow lights, I saw him in the front row next to my mother. Both dressed simply. My mother clutched her hands, holding something tightly for too long. I didn't start with heroics. I spoke of an 18-year-old girl who left this town without a hug, without a wish, with only a night sky and a nameless map. I lived as a shadow for years, I said, because they said women weren't strong enough. Because my family thought I gave up. Because I feared I'd vanish and no one would notice. I looked at my father, but not every silence is hate. Sometimes it's fear. A long pause. Then my father stood. He didn't look around, didn't adjust his shirt. Just looked at me. "I'm sorry, Emily." His voice was hoarse but clear. I served. I lost men saw names on tombstones, and I was scared. If I showed pride, you'd go deeper, risk more. I chose to be the bad guy to keep you alive. I was wrong. I should have trusted you were stronger. The room was silent. My mother stood next. She didn't say much, just walked to me and hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry for letting you fight alone." I said nothing. I hugged back, and for the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel like the extra in my own family. If you've waited for an apology, not knowing where it would come from, leave one word: absolution. Not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. After the ceremony, people shook hands, hugged lightly, some cried. Not because I was a soldier, but because I was their daughter, their old friend, Natalie's sister. I belonged here, not with medals, but with truth heard. Natalie stood at the door, face calm, eyes red. "Sis?" She hesitated. "Will you tell their story?" I nodded. "I won't let them be forgotten again." We looked at a small table with black and white Thunderwing photos, public for the first time. I knew the next fight wasn't in a war zone. It was in offices' files and collective memory. But now I wouldn't fight alone. I once thought a photo would hang someday with my name rank and years of service. People would say, that's her, the hero. Now I know some people aren't meant for frames. Some are the frame. That morning I stood on the Jacksonville Community Hall stage. No medals, no uniform. Just a faded gray t-shirt and a metal cord I used to disarm a pressure bomb in 2011. That was all I kept from Thunderwing. The hall was packed. Not because of posters, but because the truth was finally named. My father to my left, my mother to my right. Natalie in the front row, proud yet relieved, no longer the perfect sister, just a woman who chose truth over comfort. I used to think I began that silence was failure, that if no one said your name, you didn't exist. I paused. The front row was still. But I realized it's not about who remembers your name. It's about whether you remember who you are. The lights weren't harsh. I saw every face, students, veterans, my old teacher, and those who once saw me as a stray shadow. Mid-speech, an 8-year-old girl in a white dress with braided hair walked up holding a purple flower. "I want to be like you," she said. Brave, but quiet. I knelt, took the flower. In that moment, every speech hearing and night of gunshots melted into something simple, a child's belief that I was good. I whispered to her, "You don't need the world to know who you are. Just know yourself. And never let anyone make you forget." She nodded, returned to her seat, eyes brighter than the lights. If you've lived quietly, thought you weren't enough, leave one word enough. Because sometimes you don't need the stage. You just need to be the foundation others stand on. Behind me, a photo appeared on the screen. No names, no ranks. Just 6 women in Assyrian desert clothes, bloodied eyes bright. Below it, a small line, not a caption, but a definition. Some people are the frame where others are honored. I closed with a simple line. I don't need to be called a hero. I just want my daughter to know her mother stood in nameless places, but never without worth. The room stood, not for fame, for truth. After I sat on the porch's familiar chair, Natalie joined me holding papers. "Will you write Thunderwing's story?" she asked. I nodded. "Not for credit, so they're not forgotten." She paused, then said, "What if you're the one who writes others into history without needing your name there?" I smiled. Light, real, maybe, and I'm lucky for it. We sat under the blue American South sky with cicadas, fresh-cut grass, and peace born of acceptance. No more war, no more hiding, just truth, and those brave enough to live it. I don't tell this story for praise, but to remind you some sacrifice silently exists silently, and sometimes vanish silently. But silence doesn't mean worthlessness. Not everyone needs to be in the photo. Some are the frame holding it all. This story isn't just about war, honor, or justice. It's about family understanding forgiveness and standing when the world wants you to sit. If you've felt forgotten, fought in silence, or learned to forgive, leave a comment. I'm still here. And if you want to follow Untold Stories, subscribe to the channel. The next one might be yours. I'm Emily Carter. I never vanished, just waited for the world to listen.